It's 6 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's move on to item 1A, which is reading of school board norms on electronic page 2. Jeff.
There are 7 norms. Number 1, be prepared. 2, be on time. 3, value and respect each other. 4, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation. 5, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public. 6, speak up when the norms are not being followed. And number 7, advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 2, which is approval of the agenda. Dr. Brenner, do you have any addition or corrections to the agenda?
No additions other than you have a couple of documents at your workspace for later on the agenda.
Okay. Can I get a motion and a second for the agenda? Motion by Joel. Do we have a second? Second by Monty. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Now let's move on to always the highlight of our meeting, the celebrating success. And we have Dr. Saxvig, Miss Century Elementary School here, and it's on electronic pages 3 through 16 for those of you in your packet. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. So we are excited to share the successes that we are seeing at Century Elementary School. I am David Saxberg, the proud principal at Century, and my partner here is Michelle Gregoire, and we're going to tell you our story. So Michelle will be first, and then I will join in.
So we started the year by setting our Title I goal as all students at Century Elementary will achieve measurable gains in reading ability in order to meet or exceed their expected growth in reading. From there, we had 3 focus areas that have guided our work throughout the school year. Prior to, will you switch? Or do you want me to? There you go. Thank you. Prior to the school year starting, our team met to map out a way to create common planning time for grade level teachers as well as scheduled blocks for math and ELA across all of our K-5 classrooms. We wanted to create a school-wide template that allowed for literacy interventionists, math interventionists, EL teachers, special education teachers, and title paraprofessionals to meet the Tier 2 and Tier 3 needs of our students without impacting their Tier 1 time in the classroom. Our Title I funding helps provide us with additional support staff, and we wanted to make sure that their time was maximized with students each day. By creating a master schedule to support all of our students, we now have the consistency for teachers and interventionists to collaborate and share and group students across the same grade level at the same time each day. Our second focus was working to schedule data dig meetings to allow staff to look at and discuss data plans for student needs and fluent grouping within the classroom, the special education setting, and intervention settings. We used our STAR-CAT data, our STAR-CBM data, curricular resources, and teacher observation to identify our students that are at risk, on watch, and at or above benchmark. During our conversations, the teams determined if further information was needed to identify specific student instructional needs. Our third focus was to use the data collected to drive our Tier 1 instruction in the classroom and Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. During our data digs, math and literacy interventionists helped lead conversations that were student-focused to assist teachers in planning targeted instruction for all of our students. We know that some of our students do well with Tier 1 literacy instruction, So we also work to support students in small groups to maintain and increase their skills. But some of our students need further literacy support through intervention outside of the classroom. Students that needed additional literacy support work with interventionists using a wide variety of research-based resources depending on the strengths and weaknesses that were identified through diagnostic assessment. Similar to literacy, we know that some of our students do well with Tier 1 math instruction, but there are others that need more support. This year, our math interventionists have provided research-based supplemental instruction for students using the Number Worlds curriculum. Our math interventionists work with small groups to target missing foundational skills based on data that has been collected through our STAR CBMs and additional diagnostics to determine student needs. The Number Worlds curriculum works hand in hand with our Tier 1 everyday math curriculum and helps us support students.
So I do just want to point out, it's the people at Century School that makes the difference for our students, and programs and so on enhance what we're doing. So what I'm going to share with you next is how our students are doing. It's the data. So Michelle did a great job explaining how we've created the foundation with putting together a schedule where our teachers can have common planning time, where our interventionists are allowed to go in and supplement after the Tier 1 instruction. I wanted to point out too, we're fortunate at our school, we have math interventionists, and that's an example of how we used ESSER dollars. You hear a lot about ESSER money and how that's being spent. So that's an example at our school. We've used ESSER money to hire 2 math interventionists to go along with what we do for literacy, which is funded through Title I. So here's our data. And so I'm going to start with more of the detailed data, and then we'll progress to the overall data. So I just want everyone to know that we do our best at our school to not only look at overall how we're doing, but down to each individual student. So this is one example of how we can do that with the data we have, and this is broken down by subgroups. And it says the STAR CAT early literacy. What that means, early literacy, these are our kindergartners and first graders. And they take the early literacy test. CAT stands for, it's an acronym for something. It's basically, it's a comprehensive assessment that is done on the computer. And it provides a wide breadth of information for our teachers. So you can see by our subgroups where we're at. Overall, as a school, in the winter, we were 53.8. And then we can see, according to our subgroups, those are doing well, and those where, as a school, we need to focus and take a look at what we can do to make some changes. Okay? The next one then, this is grades 2 through 5. This would be their literacy, their CAT, that comprehensive assessment. I might interchange when I say reading or literacy, so please forgive me. It's the same thing. Reading test, literacy test. But this is the test that our students take. It's a comprehensive test that they took in the winter window. Again, broken down by subgroups. And I do want to point out where it says Latinx. Those are our Hispanic students. That's how it pulled up on the Star Renaissance report as we pulled up. So I apologize for maybe that misrepresentation or not being as accurate as we could have been with the report as far as what that population is. But that's our Hispanic population. And again, we can see where our students are above our overall percentage and which subgroups are below to help guide us on what we need to do as a school. Okay, the next one is our math. So this is our grades 1 through 5. You can see our overall winter score, 64.4%. We're at benchmark. and then broken down again by our subgroups. All right, the next slides now are going to be overall, our overall score, our overall data. This is everyone together, regardless of what their ethnicity is. So this is showing from fall to winter. This is the early literacy test that our kindergartners and first graders take. Just showing where we were in the fall and the winter, kind of repeating myself. The green is where we want our students to be, so more green is better. Less red is better. So we have more green in the winter than the fall, less red in the winter than the fall, but we still have work to do. The next slide, this would be CAT literacy, that's that reading assessment. And this is showing our 2nd through 5th graders, all of our students. And we'll see where our students are compared from fall to winter. Again, you can see how our green has expanded and our red has shortened. Obviously, we want 100% green. That's our goal. And that's what we always strive for. And the next one would be, did I skip over math? I have to go back one, sorry. So this is our math again, showing our grades 1 through 5. And again, you can see the overall green, overall red. This is our 1 through 5 with the comprehensive math assessment. So a lot of data. The next slide here, now I'm going to throw in another measure for you. So we have a plethora of ways of looking at our students and how they're doing. This is what's called a CBM. It's a curriculum-based measure. These are assessments that are shorter. They're smaller chunks of assessments versus the CAT, which are more comprehensive. Just want to show you another data piece here. So on this one, I provided the reading and the math on the same slide. So you can see the green to the green for the reading CBMs, winter growth, fall to winter growth, and then the math, green to green and red to red. So I invite any questions.
So I'm sorry, I don't understand, starting with the one that starts STAR, early literacy, proficiency rate, district benchmarks. When you have got Asian, 71.4%, white, black, blah, 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 down, okay? I don't understand that. Like, what is the benchmark? Well, put that in a sentence for me about, so let's use Asian. How would you describe the Asian proficiency rate? Because I'm not understanding any of those tables. I'm sorry.
For example, that one,
Yep,
Cynthia?
that's fine. Yep.
Okay. So what I wanted to show was that we are not only concerned about how we're doing as a school overall, but I wanted patrons to know that our school, we also are concerned about individual students plus subgroups. And so this is showing the percent of students by subgroup, by their ethnicity, those that are at benchmark. So if it says 76% for Asian, that would be 76% of our Asian students are at benchmark.
Okay, that helps. So what is the benchmark?
So it's set by the, maybe you can answer it better than I can.
The benchmark for each assessment varies. We have district benchmarks and we have state benchmarks. I don't have the exact district benchmark pulled up. I think it's right around that 60% overall across all of our schools in Grand Forks. So our benchmark is very close to that for math and reading. I don't have the exact number
As a subgroup with the school overall.
for our school overall. So for math proficiency, our school proficiency in the winter overall was 64.4% of our students are at or above benchmark.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Go ahead, Monty.
Thank you guys for presenting. I know it takes a lot of time to put all those slides together and gather all that data, so thank you very much. I think it's really fabulous that you guys were able to come up with blocks for your math and literacy teachers. Would you just walk us through that? Like, what does a typical day look like then if I'm in kindergarten and I meet with my math block? Or kind of what are some of their goals when they're in that planning period, if you don't mind? And hats off to you guys again for making that a priority. Thank you.
Yep. So I'll start, and then Michelle, who's smarter than I am, she'll share as well. So we've been working on actually putting together a schedule similar to what we have for the last few years. And this year we feel we're getting closer and closer to the way we would like it to be. It's not perfect, but we're trying to get there. But the main piece was, and this is where we take support from the teachers as well. So back in the old days when I was a teacher, I did my own schedule. So I taught math when I wanted to teach math. I taught reading when I wanted to teach reading. I taught social studies when I wanted to. So this has taken cooperation and support from our teachers as well, by us saying, you know what, we want to work together as a school to help our students in reading and math. And to do that, we're going to tell you when kindergarten has reading, when first grade has reading, when second grade has reading. So all kindergarten teachers, all first grade teachers teach reading at the same time. And then same thing with math. So I'm confident in saying that it wasn't a top-down decision that said, we're all doing this with no input from anyone. We've processed this over the years to get where we're at, explaining to staff the value in doing a change like that. And then the next layer to it is our interventionists, and I'll have Michelle talk about that. So that's one thing I wanted you to understand is the common times where they teach math and reading.
So in a big school like Century, we have 3 and 4 sections of every grade level. So by having those common reading blocks and math blocks, our support staff, our interventionists, our EL teachers, our special education teachers can collectively and better group students that have similar needs because they don't always end up in the same classroom. So we worked really hard to make sure that in one classroom, a student wouldn't be missing math instruction to get their special education minutes served or to meet with an interventionist for reading support. So by having those common blocks, we're able to group students and they're all working on reading at the same time, whether they're general ed, whether they're a student that needs intervention, or whether they're a student with special education minutes. Their reading time is all the same across every grade level. And then our specialists can group students. So maybe 2 students from one class with 2 students that have similar needs from another classroom. Did we answer your question?
Oh, you sure did. Thank you. That just sounds like a really powerful model to help all of your kiddos, right? To be able to have all your specialists come and be sort of magnetically comprised around the kiddos who need help during kindergarten or whatever grade you're working in. So thank you. I don't have elementary, so I appreciate I don't think about, oh yeah, you can teach reading at 2 o'clock if that's when you want to do it. So thank you for explaining that as well. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, nicely done. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions, comments? Go ahead, Melissa.
It's the school I teach at, so I'd like to say that Dr. Saxberg asked the teachers and the grade levels, what times would you prefer to do your math and prefer to do your reading? And we submitted times, and then they tried to get it as close to that as possible. So the teachers were very much involved in the schedule, which I think helped the teachers get behind the blocks and being told, like, this is when your reading is going to be and this is when your math is going to be, because we were very much a part of the conversation as well.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. So,
Yeah,
have a
thank
good
you. I
evening.
really appreciate it.
Let's move on to item 4, which is approval of the February 27th minutes on electronic pages 17 through 20. Do we have any additions or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second? Motion by Bill, second by Dave. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 5, which is public comments. I don't see anyone in the audience, and I don't have any blue cards, so we'll move on to item 6, which is superintendent's recommendations for discussion. 6A is the Valley Middle School pre-referendum update on electronic pages 21 through 30. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. I thought it would be just easier for me to present from here rather than my workspace. This would be the first slide that I have shown to our staff and to any other presentations that I've done publicly regarding pre-referendum information leading up to the May 16th referendum regarding Valley Middle School. But the first thing that I've shared in particular with all of our staff is a note of gratitude to all of them. I've had a number of people say to me, not staff, but people on the outside of education, must be nice that COVID is behind you. Life is much easier now. And really the answer to that is COVID was really, really difficult, but this has been the most challenging year with our staffing shortage. So we started the school year, as many of you have heard before, we started the school year with 90 paraprofessionals short, 15 to 16 certified staff short, especially on the special education side. So it's been really a heavy burden and a heavy lift, both physically, socially, and emotionally for our people at the building level. So they're the bearers of our short-staffedness, if that's a word. I just made it up. But nonetheless, I'm really grateful that all of our people are still showing up each and every day and are getting us through this school year. So that's how I've started. So getting to the information regarding Valley Middle School, the first thing I also share with them after my note of gratitude is I'm not here to tell you how to vote because I can't tell you how to vote. All I can do is share some information with you so you're informed if you do go to the polls on May 16th. So I share with them the backstory of how ICON was selected as the architect of record to work with us, to partner with us. An RFP was put out last spring. Several firms did present to us, and ICON, who partnered with Cunningham, rose to the top, and they were selected as our partner moving forward. We've since had weekly meetings with ICON and Cunningham folks. Sometimes the Cunningham folks, they're out of Minneapolis, so they Zoom into our meeting. And let's see, we've got Mr. Berger, Mr. Palmasino, and Mr. Larson. Board members serve on that weekly leadership meeting as well. And before I get to the postcards, I want to jump down to the second to the last check mark. I think all of you are aware that we have a 60-member Valley Middle School new design committee. Our first meeting was on January 25th. That was our organizational meeting, and we talked a lot about vision and mission and what does Valley Middle School actually stand for. And we heard over and over and over again from all of the people in the room, North End pride. So they wanted to make sure that somehow that North End pride, roll up your sleeve, perspective, attitude somehow fits into the design and the philosophy and the vision of this building. And so those 60 members represent Valley students, Valley staff, Valley parents, people who live in the neighborhood around Valley Middle School, community members at large, and also district leadership. So our final meeting was last Wednesday. So the design team from Cunningham and ICON had a little bit of time to put together what they thought was the concept that was shared by the 60 people. At our second meeting, it was called our building block meeting, if you can just imagine Legos, but they weren't quite Legos. Each of the groups, we had 6 groups of between 9 and 10 people per group. They were really organizing and laying out the building how they saw it best fit on the site. They wanted to lay it out regarding programs, whether it was special education, general education, athletics, fine arts, music, performance areas, etc. So Icahn and Cunningham went back and created a design that you will see in your board packet. When I say design, it's more of a concept design. It's not an architect rendering. And Kyle Kwame will be talking about that here in just a few minutes. So when they brought that back on the final night, they said, here's what we took away from our second meeting. Here's how we organized the building based on everybody's input. Tell us what you like about it. Tell us what you don't like. And what are your wonderings? And what they liked about it was quite a bit. And what they disliked about it, there was a couple of common themes. One in general being not enough gym space. Not enough gym space, not enough gym space. We heard that over and over and over again. So that group will go back to work and try to figure out how to fit more gym space into our overall budget. So if we could just go back up to the third check mark, we mailed out postcards. This is just a refresher. We mailed out to all district addresses, and we were hoping to get 2,500, 3,000 postcards back. We got 1,200. But of those 1,200, 70% of the respondents were somehow connected to the school district, 30% were not. So our surveying group, which was a subcontractor of Icahn and Cunningham, they are the experts in the survey, so they weighted the 30% at 70 and weighted the 70% at 30. So therefore, they came up with a metric in how the community would actually respond if those 1,200 people went to the poll. So 73% support a new $55 million Valley Middle School on its present site, which includes moving the centralized kitchen here to MSCC for another $6 million. 77.6% support an additional $18 million for safety and security. And then the third question, which we talked about at great length, do we really want to even ask this question? And the feedback that we got from our surveying group was, if you're asking all these other questions, it doesn't hurt to ask one more. And that was about roofs. Would you support $7 million for roofing projects in the future? And you can see there was support for that as well. Now again, those are the 1,200 people who responded to the survey. And then finally, we have all landed as a school board. You've declared that May 16th would be the referendum date at the Alara Center. I've also demonstrated the plat or the site of Valley Middle School, so everybody is clearly understanding that this is a 6, 7, and 8 grade building. There are no other grade levels incorporated here at all. Everybody knows that we have some green space to the west of Valley Middle School on the present site, football field, soccer field, and a couple of softball or baseball fields. The plan would be to build on the western part, closer to University Park, without encroaching on into that big dip that holds water that Mr. Palmasino has pointed out on a couple of occasions. And so once that building is up, then we would move everybody over from the existing valley to the new building, and then we would raise the old Valley Middle School, and that would become the green space. It's probably going to be at least 1 year of lag time to get that new green space up and ready for football, soccer, and baseball, so you can see that on the right-hand side. And I'll save the renderings for Kyle to talk about. So what you see up there in the yellow is not the shape of Valley Middle School, that's just a placeholder on the present land. So some of the referendum facts, these are the presentations that I'm doing. I'm making it to all of our schools, elementary, middle, and high school, presenting to all of the PTOs if they have one, to the booster clubs if they have one, and both of our high schools do. These are not large groups of people. They can be groups of 2 or they can be groups of 10, but certainly not large groups. I certainly plan on sending a video message out to parents of all of our students, and that would hit 5,400 households, which is a pretty good, excuse me, pretty good indicator of people getting the word, people connected to the school district. Other meetings that are being scheduled, All True Leadership, that's a smaller group I'll be visiting with. UND, I'll be at Education and Human Development, so I'll see Monty over there. Already presented to the Chamber BGEA subcommittee and the EDC Advisory Board. That's about 36 to 40 people. They heard the presentation a couple of weeks ago, and you can see lots of other meetings are being scheduled. And Kyle is going to be sharing a timeline of not only those meetings that have been held, that have been scheduled, and some other public open meetings as well. So these are, one thing that I want to be really clear when I'm sharing with the public is May 16th isn't just about an ask. to help us out. This is also an opportunity to share with the public all the projects that we've done and how we've captured different buckets of money to pay for those projects. So Red River, we've done 200 heat pumps over there within the last 2 years. So anybody who's been a student at Red River prior to the last 2 years knows you can wear a coat in a classroom in August, and you might wear a t-shirt in a classroom in December. But now the building is pretty well leveled out from an HVAC perspective, so we're really happy about that. We used resiliency grants to pay for that. District-wide, we've got HVAC control upgrades, so we're trying to all get on the same system, and you can see the grants paid for that as well. Century, a couple of years ago, went through a major HVAC upgrade as well. That building has always been cooled by more of a chiller than an air conditioning unit, but the general overall feeling at Century is air quality is better and classrooms are better regulated temperature-wise. Ben Franklin windows, you've heard that update before. We're just about done with all of the windows there, and there'll be a major investment in HVAC there where all classrooms will have air conditioning here between this summer and next summer. South Phoenix, both had new boilers, again paid for by ESSER. Red River Skylight, that was failing miserably, that was paid for by ESSER dollars. Central Chiller, that was done as well through the grants. And Kelly Special Education, some of you went through a walkthrough there before the construction project started. We were able to use some IDEA, special education funds, to create a special education suite to address all of the needs of varying special needs students. And I'm going to have to skip over that second to the last one. Ben Franklin HVAC, I already talked about that. So, Brandon, I might circle back to you if you know the CIA geotechnical one. Can you jump in on that one too, please? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem, Dr. Brenner. That's just been some of the preliminary work over at the site where the Career Impact Academy will be going. So as the city's contributed by bringing that building down, we need to make sure that the soil that's brought in, the fill, was up to grade so that some of those ESSER dollars went into that project early on.
Thanks very much for that. We are going to invest in Cushman Track and Field as well. The turf has come to end of life. Actually, we got an extra year out of it. And so this is a rendering of what it's going to look like. And if you recall, we're able to do some of this work through our partnership, our $750,000 10-year partnership with Altru. So you can see their logo is going to be stamped on the field along with Cushman at center field at the 50-yard line. The Central Knights and Red River Rough Riders will both feel like this is their home field. You can see their names and logos in the end zone as well. The track will be resurfaced, and we'll be able to bring some of the Class B regional track meets back to Grand Forks, and that's a revenue maker for a lot of our restaurants and in some cases hotels as well. So that track has seen its end of life as well, so we're excited about that. The Career Impact Academy. Good news on this, which has been shared with all of you in the past, that $10 million we've been waiting for, the grant, the matching grant from the state. The governor has signed that into order, so that money is available for us now. That matches the $11.5 million that was raised locally here. And I was just in Bismarck Thursday and Friday, and there's lots of positive talk about that inflationary piece that we're all worried about because it's no longer $21.5 million to build that center. It's more like 29 to 30 million, but there seems to be an appetite to get it done, without us having to go to the bank because we have no interest in going to the bank, even if it's at 1%. We have more interest in the state really taking over that cost, the inflationary cost, so we don't have to absorb that. So we can move into the design phase. Mr. Ripley has been very involved with JLG along with Mr. Bombach on just about a weekly basis. So they will get more into the design because we know the money is coming. Shovels in the ground, late summer. We're excited about that. And I already talked about the last check mark as well. Central High School pool. We've talked as a board, as a finance committee, as a board, and as a finance committee. And what the board hasn't probably officially done is made an official motion that we're going to reinvest money in Central's pool. It's been my perspective that there's been unified support to get water back in that pool, to reconstruct the shell so we don't have moisture issues. And we know that Hislop Pool is coming offline July 1, 2024. I just talked to President Armacost on Friday about that again, and that's pretty much a hard stop for UND. We know that if the city moves forward with an aquatics or turf or both, we're still years away from that. And it's probably going to be turf. It's probably going to be one or the other, not both, because a sales tax, if approved by the voters, the extended sales tax, if approved by the voters, wouldn't be enough to pay for both. So I think it's prudent for us to reinvest in Central's pool. It's how much do we want to reinvest? 1 to 3 million. Mr. Bombuck and I have a walkthrough tomorrow morning with Mr. Strandell and 3 pool consultants tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, so we should have a better understanding of what it's going to take to move that forward. And we're looking at, some naming rights, philanthropic opportunities, and some other ways that we might be able to fund this through a lease agreement. So just to make it a little bit easier on the budget. But my perspective is what I've heard from all of you is we need to get moving on this so we don't get caught in a dry spell, no pun intended, without any water for our swimmers. And I think our all-state swimmer, Ryan over there, would not want to see an empty pool next fall, right? Okay? So that's been the message. That's been the real skinny message. It's about 17 minutes at each of these stops. Tomorrow night I'll be with the Traders and something association. Builders and Traders. Yeah, not Traders and Trappers. Builders and Traders. Tomorrow night at 6:30. There sounds like there'll be between 90 and 100 people in the room when I present then. So that's what I've been up to. Happy to accept feedback from the group if there's anything that I've missed.
What kind of questions are you getting from your audiences? Is there certain themes that you hear from a lot of them, or not necessarily?
No, just more of an appreciation that we're going to take care of that middle school. Everybody knows we've been limping along there, and we're one steam pipe leak away from closing that school, so I think there's just more of an appreciation.
Feedback from board members? Go ahead, Cynthia.
So later in the board packet, you have a lot of information about Valley. I'm not finding it right now, but, just showing the status of Valley. Are you including that in your, you didn't for this, so I'm assuming that you're not. So was that an intentional decision? Because when I'm out and about, people don't seem to know about Valley. And so I was thinking that maybe that would be good to include.
Yeah, I will likely be doing that. Thank you for that feedback. So those are some new images that were for the next presentation, or those are being submitted to the state, correct? Under the construction piece?
Just to clarify, to answer that question, are you talking about the building block type of rendering of a design concept? No, sorry.
What I'm talking about is, I'll try to find it here. This is a big packet and I didn't print it.
Some of those internal pictures of Valley?
Yeah,
Oh,
that, and just, bullet points of what our main, so what I go around and say is, the HVAC is poor, we're not gonna be able to get that fixed. I mean, my language would be very different than, say, than your language, or a buildings and ground person. But I always talk about air conditioning, I talk about my own experience going on that tour in August when it was like 110 in the room. I talk about the ADA accessibility. I talk about getting students from one point to the other. That's what I say when people say, oh, I think Valley looks great from the outside. Mm-hmm. So just, a bullet point. This document in here it starts on page, I'm looking at Moody's Investors Service. Is that where it is? No.
102 for the deficiency list, and then the photos start on 103.
Thank you. So that's what I was thinking might be really potent.
And we have spent time during my presentation, it's not on the slide, but I do spend time talking about ACing all of our classrooms across the district, with the exception of Twining. That's a whole separate project for another day and another conversation. So thank you for that feedback, Dr. Shep.
And just to clarify, Dr. Brenner, to answer that question back, that is an appendix for the construction loan application. And that was provided to us when Icon provided their building walkthrough and they went through Valley Middle School.
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just suggest is on your one layout of the pre-2023 referendum capital investment project and funding source, on that list, I wonder if we should list what we're doing in the next 2 summers with all the HVACs, that all elementary schools are going to end up with new either HVAC systems or air conditioning within, or all new lighting throughout the whole district, that little subtotal that we put in. So it looks like we're doing more than just Ben Franklin. We just add that, and it can be a quick summary of our package. So if people ask, where did the 10 mills go? Here were the 10 mills. They went right here. We're using them for all these.
Amber?
Dr. Brenner, I'm wondering if it would be, if you'd be able to work with the liaison school board members when you go to the school meetings, and maybe they could just attend and see what the constituents for that school, but could possibly also bridge the gap for like just that liaison connection. So maybe if they had a time, even if they couldn't go, that's totally fine, but that might be a good dual relationship there.
Okay, thank you for that. And at your workspace, Kyle's going to be talking about a timeline that has a number of the meetings scheduled already. So if you're a liaison for any of those buildings, let's just coordinate together and see if you can join me.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Go ahead, Monty.
No question. Dr. Lynn, you just referenced the extended sales tax vote that might be coming. I'm just curious if you happen to know a timeline for that.
The looser conversation is about the fall of 2023 for the community-wide vote around an aquatics and turf facility.
Okay, thank you. I was just making sure that wasn't like coming about the same time.
No, we actually coordinated. We sat down with City Administrator Todd Phelan and Mayor Boczynski and asked them respectfully to avoid this spring.
Other questions? Go ahead.
So I know my style would be different than your style, and you have to decide what your style is, and I think you have. However, I always have lots of advice, and one of the things that I think is right before the Q&A slide, to have a slide that says, don't forget to vote. I mean, you can remind people, you can't tell them how to vote, but just to kind of do that quick, those bullet points at the very end, so you're not leaving with the Central High School pool, which is totally not related to the Valley Middle School referendum. Because this, to me, the presentation is about Valley. And so, just.
This one is a little bit different because this is the one I've been sharing with staff. So tomorrow night, publicly, I probably won't share the central pool piece, but I'll add those other components that you've just listed. And Mr. Palmasino, the grid, I actually have that on another slide as well that talks about the AC at our 4 to 5 elementary schools.
Any other final thoughts? We have 7 or 8 more presentations about middle school tonight too, so if not, thank you, Dr. Brenner. Let's move on to 6B, which is, oh, surprise, Valley Middle School. New Design Committee update. It's on electronic pages 31 through 34. Dr. Brenner, we turning it straight to Kyle? Kyle, you're up.
Great, thank you. Just to provide a little background, some of the comments we heard around what's being done currently with the building levy, what are the big issues at Valley. So we have that really well identified in the survey. So we will respectfully offer Dr. Brenner some slides so that he can incorporate that. That's part of why you hired us, is that we've got lots of expertise in that. And so some of the comments that we heard are things that we would agree and just add some things onto there. And that information is already really succinct and presented on the survey, and we feel like it's been vetted and we could share that pretty clearly. So those are great points, and we'd like to add those. All right, so I've got a couple things that we're going to show you tonight. So one thing that we want to make sure is, so you'll see the label at the bottom, conceptual diagram. So we have not designed it. There has not been a formal design process. We purposefully go through and understand the types and kinds of spaces you need to make sure that there's a budget that is in alignment with the programs that you're delivering at Valley. What we don't do is go through a formal design because frankly, you guys don't want to pay us for that, right? So the district doesn't want to pay us, the public doesn't want to pay us. So this is an opportunity for us to validate, make sure that we understand everything that we're hearing, all the needs, and then let people see that this is a concept of all the things that would have to be on this site with a big caveat of we have to go through formal design. There won't be a single staff member at Valley that isn't engaged. There'll be a formal design committee that'll be engaged. We'll talk with the administration. We'll talk with you guys. There is, I hope you guys are excited. There's weeks and weeks of conversations that will happen and thousands of decisions that need to be made on where things are aligned. Should a room be here? Shouldn't be here? What we're trying to make sure is, we've gone through the program, we've gone through the exercises, and what's great is that we did all that work, coalesced all the different 6 options into the one option that you see here, and then even after that, we met with the public, with our community design committee, and we got so many changes, and it was, I would say it was humbling. The list of likes was very short compared to the lists of, dislikes or wonders, which just means that people were paying attention, people were looking, people were curious. So lots and lots of things that we've already addressed, and you'll see here's the version that we presented last week, and you can see here one of the big things that are, I would say, one of the biggest common themes from that exercise that we had with the block party was that we wanted 6th, 7th, and 8th to be separate, and ideally we wanted 6th grade in, I wouldn't say a completely different space, but it kind of off on its own so that there was a safe transition space for them to come in and maybe not mix it up completely on day one where classroom here and classroom here is your 8th graders and your 6th graders are trying to run over each other. So if you can see here, if you look at this diagram, you can see here is your 6th grade wing, 7th grade wing, 8th grade wing. You've got your kitchen, your cafeteria, cafe, commons area, your drop-off right here, then aligned to kind of feed right off here so that your parent drop-off from cars is coming out of this spot. Then you've got your bus drop-off. One of the interesting conversations is that, you don't have that many buses, right? So maybe there's a better way to set that up. So maybe the bus drop-off is only half, and maybe we reconfigure and reset how that looks. But the important thing is to pull as much traffic as we can off of the front entrance. We're effectively doubling or more than doubling the current parking that's at Valley based on this, on these diagrams. And then you can see here, we'd have exit out of the gym area to access the fields without crossing traffic. So a couple of the things you'll see, there's art and there's FACS and there's other things that are all represented here. The media spaces, those are all things that, again, we'll have to confirm many, many times, but we've got the spaces in here. The other thing that you'll see here is, so here's our learning studios. We call that, really it's our classrooms, right? But there's so much more that's going on in there, and there's so much more that's being set up for flexibility. So while we have the learning studios here, then we have our commons area gathering space, we have science classrooms, then we have small room, breakout spaces for collaboration, for one-on-one instruction, things like that. And your admin entry is right here, your media center, that's we're gonna call that your next level library, right? That's right there above. And this was what we presented, and I would say there was, maybe 200 comments of what we need to change, which was awesome, right? That's the point, right? So we'll just fast forward a little bit, and you can see here's another little diagram to show it kind of zoomed in. Again, this is the amount of space. It is not a design. It is to make sure that we've got the space, and there's a little bit of thought in adjacencies, knowing that there's a lot more work that has to happen. And as we go here, so here's our common ground, more gym space, no cafetorium. So you can see here, they've got your commons area and then a stage space. So that's just an allotment of square footage for some performance space. All over the state, there's cafetorium or gym cafetoriums, and no one really likes them. One of the things we always say is that the more things a space does, the worse it is at doing those things, right? So we heard loud and clear that people didn't like that, but what we didn't want to do was write that off without talking to folks. The folks at Cunningham have done some really neat I would call them cafetoriums all over the country, and there is one in particular that we explored that I think could be executed well. So while we heard loud and clear, don't do a traditional one, we do think it's something that we'll just talk about during design. And again, it's something that lots of decisions have to be made, but we want to make sure we allocate some sort of performance space. It's not an auditorium. We'd love to have an auditorium, but we're, one, concerned about budget, and two, concerned about equity. So unless we're willing to put a couple of more auditoriums, maybe that's not the right thing to do. So how do we give them something? So you can see here again, specialists in each wing. So there's classrooms over here, and you'll see in the next version that I'll show you in a second, they've further dialed in what those offices look like. Moving the media space, again, you'll see that. Do we have enough classrooms? There's a lot of questions along that. And there's actually, in each wing, there's an extra classroom that is that foreign language, is that, computer, robotics. There's all kinds, well, there's some of those are in there anyway, but there's an extra classroom in each wing for those flex spaces, and we'll go through, and again, we have a pretty detailed program, but lots and lots of decisions that have to be made. Okay, so we'll move on. So that's how we ended there, and do we have... Cindy, the document that was sent today. Oh, it's just, yep. And is there a new version from Cunningham? No, okay, all right. Well, we already have a new version that we've worked on since last Wednesday, and then again, dialed in a little bit more today, where we're just adding more spaces that are just a little bit more identified. We're actually not adding square footage, we're just identifying more things. We just as we go through and we hear these questions and these common concerns, again, do we have enough specialist space? Do we have enough small group space? Going and putting those in, it was really valuable, and also just locker bays and things like that, making sure that people understand the square footage is already there, but just layering a little bit more detail now that we've got some feedback. So with that, I'll pause. Yeah, thank you.
So, and I'll just reiterate Dr. Brenner's comments. I think we have to be careful getting in the weeds, because these are
Yep.
concepts. These aren't designs, and there's going to be plenty of time for design. So I'll open it up to questions or comments from board members. Go ahead, Amber.
Just to clarify, some of these building blocks look like they're on top of each other. What is it a two-story building or a one-level basement?
Yep, thank you. Yep, it's two-story, with the exception of some of your common spaces in your gym space. So absolutely, I apologize, I didn't mention that. So each grade wing would have 2 levels, representing 2 teams for each grade, which is how they have it currently situated. So it's an exact mirror. So these classroom wings are mirrored exactly on top of each other.
Further clarifying questions or comments?
I have one more. So obviously the structure around the building changes in terms of the infrastructure with parking and inroads and sidewalks and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about any data and/or what this might do to effectively improve the neighborhood in terms of accessibility? I know when you drive over there, there's sort of like this dead-end, one-way thing. And then secondly, who bears the burden of that? I think one question I might have if I was a homeowner is like, would I get specially assessed if the streets are being torn up or the sidewalks? So I would love the benefit of some new infrastructure and sidewalks and things like that. But so first question is any data that you have, or how could this improve the neighborhood? And then secondly, what goes into the planning of that, and who pays for that?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So there are, the work of understanding traffic and understanding the site and how things change is the work of a civil engineer. We have a civil engineer on board as our team, but we're not authorizing them to work, just like we're not authorizing any of the engineers to work until the public approve a project, at which point absolutely they would be involved, and I imagine that would be a specific report that they'd bring back to you guys to understand, here's the changes, here's what we're proposing. I'm not sure exactly to the level a traffic study would go, for example, but I do know that that's a big piece of it. And then as you look at sidewalks and infrastructure, what's great about, infill development is everything that you need is kind of there. Maybe we have to move some things around, but that's all within the budget. So there wouldn't be a new special assessment if we're replacing the sidewalks as part of the budget. I can't speak to, anything that maybe the park district might do, but generally, when you're redoing a project, you're including all of those within the costs. So that wouldn't be a special assessment.
Other clarifying questions, thoughts, comments? I just have one, and I don't want any answers or anything, but I'm assuming that there'll be a big group that'll be working on how do we incorporate that beautiful park next to it. I mean, I see the science wings for 7th and 8th are right next to it, but I'm assuming there'll be some time and attention spent on how do we maximize that beautiful park we have next door, and that comes in design and development later on, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of are stealing our thunder for probably the next presentation. So we actually took the common space and we moved it to the middle and put the learning studios on the side so that juts out facing the parks. So it's exactly, we're very focused on that. It's such an asset. It's something we don't want to waste, that opportunity. So, yeah.
Sorry, obviously Kyle and I didn't pre-talk before this meeting. So, other clarifying questions or comments? If not, why don't we move on to the next one, which is the timeline of activities, which is at your table side. Go ahead, Kyle.
Thank you. So as you see, this timeline of activities, there are a few things that we are hyper-focused on. Getting the materials out in a concise, understandable, informational fashion. We start with a fact sheet. So that's a sheet that's going to have some general information about the project or projects, information about tax impact, information about where to vote and when to vote, trying to make sure that people have all the facts so that they can make an educated decision, yes or no. Hopefully they just have the facts. And we take that as our fact sheet. We make flyers out of it. We'll have them at the schools. We'll have it online. Then we take that and potentially we'll use that to form the foundation of an FAQ. So an FAQ sheet, we'll start with some of the things from the fact sheet. And sorry, I'm just going to go through some of the things we're going to make. I apologize, I didn't lead into that. So FAQ sheet will start with some of the common questions that we've already heard. And then the goal is that as the community puts or submits questions to the district, if someone has a question, then someone else has it too. So let's put it in. So it's very common that this FAQ sheet will start as two pages and it'll grow to 8 or 9 by the time we're done with this. Because as we keep hearing new questions, why not put the answer out there? So people will understand there's a concise, single-page document. You need information, here's where you go. You want to dive deeper? Great. Here's some more information where you can see. And if your question isn't answered, submit it. Please get us the opportunity to just answer that question. Those are two really, really important pieces of information. We'll potentially work with those to create mailers. So you'll see there's some optional things on here. There's things like mailers. There's things like videos. There is some public meetings where we might hold we'd hold maybe a town hall where we do an informational presentation and then open it up to just a forum to just answer the questions. So those are all, again, opportunities to share. That fact sheet of information will form the basis of everything that we're sharing out so that, again, we're not being persuasive. We want to get the facts out. As you look through here, you'll see there's all the dates that are already scheduled for Dr. Brenner to present. You'll see there's an allocation of dates for the schools and PTOs and boosters that have not been scheduled. There's also an allocation of dates for small community groups. So you think your, Kiwanis, you think, the folks like that, the Rotaries, any of those clubs, if you guys are, listening online or you guys are a part of it here, if there's 4 or 5 people, I think you guys probably want Dr. Brenner in front of them. And I've already said, before, I'm volunteering my services to go along or support with presentations, to support with Q&A, anything like that. That's pretty standard. This is, again, a little bit different because this is the community that I live in and pay taxes and send my kids to school here. So I'm extra involved and extra invested. So hopefully, as you go through this and as you see this document, which this is another document we want to share, I hope that people will see this and say, oh, geez, if I haven't heard about this, I'm living under a rock. because there should be a point where everyone's been touched. We want to, we might want to even engage the papers and engage the radio and engage anyone that's really willing to listen. All we want to do is share the facts. If people don't want to support the project, we're happy for them to not do it. As long as they've got the facts, we've done our job. So you'll see through here, we've got public meetings again, we've got potential online information that we want to share. It's a lot of things that need to happen between now and then. And the other piece of the pie is that while Dr. Brenner is kind of signed up and paid to do this, if any of you guys want to step in, it only helps the process if more people are communicating different perspectives other than Dr. Brenner's or mine potentially, and you can share your thoughts, your reasoning, why you're supporting what you're supporting. Again, you can say, I want this to happen, and that's why I voted for it. You just can't ask someone else to do the same, if that makes sense. So if you look here, it's going to be busy 2 months. This is standard. We don't generally do it longer because Dr. Brenner will start packing, because it's going to, if you're doing a pre-referendum effort for 4 months, you will burn him out. So 2 months, he's going to get in front of everybody that'll take him, and hopefully we'll provide enough materials that you guys will trust that the community has been informed. We're trusting a lot in the information that we've already received and the feedback that we've got from our community design group, our design committee that really provided some really, really good feedback. So I'll pause on that and let you guys look at that. You'll see some of the dates. So we are meeting again tomorrow. We are meeting every week. So the goal of tomorrow's meeting, for example, is just to apply dates to a lot of these things and to go over the first draft of the fact sheet. So we're wasting no time. So assuming you guys tell us to do something, we are immediately going to jump in tomorrow. I'll pause.
We also have him on the sermon circuit. He's sermoning at every church in town, so.
That's perfect.
I'll open it up for questions, comments. Looks extensive, and I think as board members, I think we would be willing to help as much as we can. Sometimes sometimes having more than one person, having 2 or 3 there, even if it's just to nod your head a lot, I think is worth it. And I think any and all of us will be willing to help as much as we can. So, go ahead, Amber.
I just wanted to say that I'm very impressed by the process that's been done, the timeline that's here. It does seem like a really long horse and pony show, but I think the feedback that we've got previously is that maybe folks didn't have enough information. And so just the attention to detail to say we're collecting out all the questions, we're going to put them on the website, like that to me shows that we're getting information out there as much as we can. And I just hope that from this, there's encouragement of other individuals to help share accurate information. And so I think that's great. I guess the only thing I didn't see on here was, is there any like there's some flyers and things, but who handles like a letter to the editor? Not a yes or no vote, but just here's the information, want you all to be aware. Is there any radio conversations? Is there any, so sort of kind of just the extra piece, any billboards, stuff like that?
Yep. So traditionally, I would say probably like the committee that we have typically been meeting in would decide some of those nuanced things like letters to the editor. And then I would say it would be something that would be shared with the board if anyone's willing to do it. If not, I think a consistent message from Dr. Brenner is vital, right? So I don't see any problem with those just coming out from him. I also think that I think that the radio in this community is powerful, and I think that we cannot ignore it. And so I think that there's going to be things there that we need to address. And I think the key is this, the more that we're out in front of everything, we can fill in the gaps, and it leaves less for rumors to take. And people can think whatever they want, and that's fine. But if we've provided all the background, and that's why, specifically looking at the survey, we have really good information about why Valley needs attention. We have really good information about the things you've already approved and are doing with your building fund, with your ESSER dollars like you just saw. Some of the feedback I've heard is, show us some pictures, maybe don't show us the list there. Let's see something that's a little bit more tangible. So those are things that that's what we'll help with. Those are all the little things that we do. I live in this community, I care about this community, but I work in districts all over the state, and this is, what we're doing right now is what I do every day. So we'll help you through this, and it hopefully looks a little different than last time, and that's kind of the point.
Other clarifying questions, comments, thoughts? Go ahead, Monty.
Well, I just appreciate the thoroughness, Kyle. It sounds like, the first time the referendum came, there was a bunch of perhaps reasons that didn't pass, but now this time, it sounds like we're educating people, right? Educate, educate, educate. You're being nimble in terms of, we'll go here, we'll talk about the radio, look at this timeline, and you're being responsive, right? You just said, we're going to get out in front of any kind of information that may be contrary to what the truth is. And so I appreciate that attention to detail, and hopefully it all goes well, and people will look at that and understand that everybody's done their due diligence and in trying to provide a fabulous education for kiddos at Valley, and trying to help bring the North End spirit, that's not the right way you mentioned that, but North End pride to light in a beautiful building. So thank you.
I think just to echo what Cynthia said, a picture or a video is actually worth more than 1,000 words, probably. I mean, sometimes those visuals are just, no matter how you say it, that picture is really powerful. And even some of the videos that you've got of walking through areas and stuff. So.
And one thing to maybe put some caution there is that we're going to do our best to show a little bit, because what we don't want is the community to think that we've designed it, because we haven't. We need the staff, we need the teachers. So it's going to be a fine balance between, do we maybe show a little bit of what the entrance could look like, understanding here's some common elements that we'd like to include, but we have to respond to what the staff needs. We have to respond to the budget. So I hope, I want to just temper that we're not going to have a million super shiny, fancy, beautiful
Actually, Kyle,
graphics.
what I think Cynthia and I are talking about is the existing
Oh,
building,
sure.
not the future.
Okay.
The pipes corroding and the water. I mean, not the new. We're talking about the existing. Are you not, Cynthia, as well?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
that's what we mean. Not
Okay,
not
sure.
the future, but why do we need to replace this building? There's a lot of good videos and pictures of that.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think another fact, and I think there's an intention to get this out there, is just that percentage of repair costs compared to the FEMA standard of when we want to just raise the building. That is one data point that has really resonated with the people that I've talked to, is that it's just, would be not a good investment of taxpayer money to invest in that current building because of that. So paired with some of those images, I think that is enough of a foundation of the why.
Thank you. Any further comments? Go ahead, Monty.
Ryan, not to put you on the spot, over here. Yep, thank you. But Ryan attended school there. Ryan has working knowledge of being a student in Valley as it stands today, right? To me, there's a lot of power in having Ryan speak to that, or other students who've been at Valley, or students who are there now. Like, why would a different building be beneficial to all of these people? And to Catherine's point with FEMA dollars. So I think, I don't know for what that's worth. To me, hearing from Ryan and his counterparts are really important.
Thank you. Cynthia.
My question, Kyle, is on the timeline. Media graphics optional, email graphics optional. What does that mean, optional?
So we are going to discuss kind of in I would say our steering committee about what additional things we want to do. With social media, for example, I would say a post every day about the school is not the right path forward. It's making sure we only create the content that makes sense, driving people to vote, driving people to get more information, maybe not focusing on individual issues. And then same thing, what was the second one that you had,
It says email graphics optional.
Yep, exactly. So are we going to do an email blast? And if so, what are the things we want to include? So we don't want to presume that you want to do everything. We want to do everything. But we want to make sure, we're working with Tracy, the tone makes sense, it matches your communication from your district, and then we want to make sure, based on what the committee wants, that it aligns. So it's a fine balance between making sure we don't share a piece that is insignificant or drowns out the important things, or, yeah. So it's just, they're optional because we have to, I would say, go through and dial them in.
Any final thoughts, questions? Thanks, Cal. I'm sure you're going to stick around here for the next parts too. Let's move on to items 6D and E, which is facilities of the whole committee report and finance committee report, electronic pages 36 through 39. Brandon.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Members of the board, I've been asked to kind of bring these two together because it's an extension of the similar conversation through both committee structures. So just first, the Facilities Committee of the Whole met on February 27th following the board meeting. Kyle, who you just heard from, and his coworker Tom Wesley from ICON gave the presentation, walking us through really a lot of the conversation we've heard resonated here tonight. We talked through weighing those options, considering possible tax impacts. And from that committee, it was requested to bring forth some of those possible tax impacts to the Finance Committee, which I'll transition to, but just note attached to the agenda for this item is also those minutes. And so transitioning into that Finance Committee is where then we started to take some of that direction. The soft direction from the Facilities Committee was strong support for Valley Middle School, the associated child nutrition relocation, a eager support for safety and security, although they said, is this the right number, looking through some different amounts. And then, of course, the roofing question was brought forward, and even from the Facilities Committee, it was, let's leave that to the building fund. This was, I think, more affirmed in the Finance Committee here. So similar conversation on the first agenda item for that meeting. The tax impacts were presented through a number of different scenarios, really ranging from what could be considered a base project of Valley Middle School and child nutrition, all the way through to fuller amounts that are inclusive of roofs and safety and security. Ultimately, the Finance Committee had made a formal recommendation to the board, which is a total referendum request of $79 million from the voters. This would include the Valley Middle School demolition and construction, that's the $55 million number we've talked about. The relocation of the central kitchen to MSCC, that's the $6 million number we've talked about. And also the safety and security improvements concept discussed at $18 million. One of the key pieces of information here is the estimated tax impact on residential value of $100,000, and that came to $96.93 annually on that. Also included was a quick update on our transportation RFP that went out for bid. That was a high-level conversation about how it had been posted in the paper in early January on 2 occasions, and the bids were received February 14th. What was reported in the Finance Committee was that we received one bid, and that was from Dietrich, and we received 2 no-bid responses from 2 other companies. And just later in our agenda here this evening, we'll talk through more completely that situation. So that completes my reading of the minutes essentially, but that's the progress of this conversation up until this point.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Let's open it up for discussion. Bill, you want to start us off? Not to pick on you, I'm going to pick on you.
Go ahead. Yeah, with the finance, we did have a good discussion on this. We had some discussion over whether it should be Valley and the kitchen only without the safety and security. And I think by the end of the meeting, we looked at the numbers of support that safety and security had gotten us. And also, I think we talked a little bit about the active shooter alarm that was just that day at Red River, how important people really feel. And the first question in the survey, I think it's almost 90%, over 95% that they want safety and security, in there. So we came to the conclusion with the three of us or with the group, that we would add the three together. And we also, I think we all agreed on that the roofing part of it should be done with our maintenance money that we asked for with the 10 mils. That's kind of, others have any
Other
comments?
Finance Committee board members want to speak?
I would agree that that's what we talked about. And I don't want everyone here to hate me, but I have gotten one email from a North End person that is quite prominently playing in this realm. And she asked again about splitting the question. I think, Amber, you had brought it up at the meeting, the Finance Committee meeting, about not having it all together. And I thought we had said that it was recommended to put it all in one block. And so I dismissed the topic kind of at the finance or facilities meeting. But I've been questioning it since I got this email recommending going this. You all got it?
I think all board members got it. My concern in looking at that is, I don't see how it can be an or. We need a new middle school. There's no question about that. There's also no question in my mind that we need improved safety and security. And so to me, both are equally important for different reasons. And I think our job, Dr. Brenner's job, everybody that works here, that lives in the educational world, need to explain to people why it's necessary for that. I just, at the beginning of this process, months and months ago, I thought it was maybe an or, one or the other or something else, but I don't see how. I think this community needs both of them, and what we need to do is educate the public as to why it's so important, safety and security are so important, why a new middle school is so important, because that's what's going to be best for the future. So that's what I think. So go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I guess I would look at it if we're thinking that we need to separate the votes, then I would rather see us separate the elections and have a vote on Valley in the kitchen by itself. 9 months later, another vote on safety and security, then put it on an agenda, because a lot of voters will come in and they'll look at 60 million versus 18 million. Well, I'm going to vote for the 18 million. I don't save myself a lot of money. So I don't see it as if we're going to keep the three together, then I think we go in as one vote. That's how I would look at it.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
My mind kind of flittered for a second. So if we are sticking with this plan, then Dr. Brenner's presentation perhaps should initially have the one that you're going around and talking, which wasn't included tonight, some information about safety and security. Because I haven't talked about safety and security at all, except to say, I agree that people want safety and security, but there's nothing here so that's kind of brings it in. I appreciate the conversation, because I do think that we need to think about whether we want to have, the suggestion that I got was, that you all got then, I guess, was two questions. And I thought Kyle had said that wasn't advised to do 2 questions.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Brenner, and I'm not going to speak for him, but I am going to speak for him, even though he's sitting 3 feet from me. I think Dr. Brenner doesn't want to get in front of the board, and so we haven't approved. We've talked a lot about Valley Middle School. We haven't approved any of this yet. I suspect after we approve this, whatever it is we approve, that's how his presentation is going to be modified. Now I'll let Dr. Brenner speak for himself.
No, all I would say is I agree. I'm just waiting for more information, decisions at the board table. So the presentations that I made, I would call them preliminary presentations, and that I've shared with the groups that this is fluid and things are going to change. That's why I haven't printed many packets.
Other finance committee members want to speak? Josh, Amber, go ahead, Josh, if you want to.
I would just agree with everything that was said. I mean, there was extensive conversation, I would say, around all options and which option to go with, and the positives and negatives to all. And when it came down to it, we really just felt strongly about the fact that we should take the roofing piece away, use maintenance money to do that, and move forward the two other options. Because I think around this table, we've heard, along with in the public, we've heard both of those items being extremely important. And then along with the fact that there was a question also in the survey that brought the two together, if you read it, brought the two together, and there was higher support for that together than there was for one single item alone. So we felt pretty strongly about it.
Amber, any other thoughts that you have? Okay. Now let's open it up to other board members who aren't part of the finance committee. Thoughts, questions, comments, soapbox meetings. Okay. Joel?
I just think that I appreciate Bill's, and I've said it a few times to Bill, his insight and input and experience in all of it. I don't think I would want to support spreading it around or making two votes. I think that our experts have given us advice, and it makes sense to me to keep the two votes or keep everything together in one vote for $1 amount, all of which is necessary and needed, and I'm comfortable with that approach.
Thank you. Other comments from board members? Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Echo a lot of what's already been said. I think having them together in one question is an ask that benefits the whole community. I do think there's a better chance of it passing together than separately. And one thing that stood out in some of the earlier comments from the breakout sessions was, in regard specifically to safety and security, what's the cost of waiting? What's the cost of doing nothing? And I just want to stand on the side of, I said at the last meeting, keeping students safe, but it applies to our faculty, our staff, our support professionals, classified staff, everyone who calls those buildings home every day.
Before I move on, I just want to make a comment about I sat in on the last community session last week, just sat in the back quietly listening to, and I was so impressed and so thankful for the people that gave up 3 long nights and the thoughtfulness that they put into this and stuff. So I think if you know anybody on that list, and I don't have the list in front of me, but thank them, because they put in a lot of extra time, and they did a wonderful job, and they were very passionate about what they did. And I think the product that has come out of it was so much better because of the input of that group. So Brandon, you want to go on to item 6F, which is the general obligation school building funds and special election information and timeline. It's our electronic pages 40 and 41.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lund. Members of the board, this is the last item on the point for discussion. It's meant to just give you a little bit of timeline here as to what goes forward. You'll find in the subsequent agenda items, they have been tailored to capture the spirit of that $79 million ask. And so these next steps are really putting in place to everything that would happen from this point forward should the board decide to move forward with this scope of a project. So this memo articulates the authority and requirements and timelines associated. So North Dakota law allows for this governing body to adopt a resolution by 2/3 of your body, which would then dedicate tax levies towards, general obligation bonds used for construction of a building. There's a 60-day time period. We're at day 71, away from our May 16 day. So now is the time to make the decision. And then with the special election itself, there's not a lot of parameters constraining us here, but those special elections do need to take place prior to October 1st. And then of note here, the nature of the special election and this kind of general obligation bond is it does need to pass by a 60% majority. So that's the the threshold here for approval from the voters. Attached here is a more thorough timeline of just what will take place between now and then. And you can see here, we'll start just at the top of the list here with 60 days out, but immediately we'll start into public notification. And that's the crux of what will take place here, is ensuring that we're following the legal requirements for all information out the door. So just wanted to provide that basis before we stepped into the action portion of the agenda.
Questions or comments for Brandon on that? Seeing none, let's move on to item 7, which is superintendent's recommendations for action. 7A is initial resolution for general obligation school building bonds on electronic pages 42 through 44. Brandon.
Thank you, Dr. Lund, members of the board. So this initial resolution proposed the issuance of general obligation bonds in principal amount not to exceed $79 million, as discussed, for school building construction purposes. Special election held May 16th. And as attached here, you'll see, and what the administrative recommendation would be is to adopt the initial resolution. The first page, page 43 of the packet, is actually a document for which we'll just validate in minutes having been presented. But starting on page 44, the electronic packet, or just that page 44, is you'll see the actual initial resolution. We work with Arnson, Stewart, and Wagner on a legal firm for these types of bond referendum to ensure that we have all the right legal language and documentation put together. And then we work with PFM, a bond counsel, to make sure that we've had all the right calculations as well.
Clarifying questions or comments? Seeing none, the administration recommendation is to adopt the initial resolution for general obligation school building bonds. I would entertain a motion and a second. We have a motion by Jeff. Do we have a second? Second by Joel. Any final clarifying questions or comments? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to 7B, which is resolution calling a special election to vote on the question of approving those bonds. Electronic pages 45 through 51. Brandon.
Thanks again, members of the board. This is that resolution as just described by Dr. Lund. Issuance of GO bonds for $79 million pursuant to North Dakota state law. In this, you'll notice on page 48 of the electronic packet, as a part of the resolution is the actual official ballot language. Just to make a point or two about that for your own edification, anyone listening, sometimes the language can be a little confusing. I want to point out two things here. Is one, the components of it are articulated in the second half of that. This is the narrative, and this matches what was described here tonight. So providing funds together with other funds to construct and equip a new Valley Middle School, demolish the existing Valley Middle School, construct and modernize the child nutrition facility, and then construct and equip safety and security facilities. Those are the four main components involved with this question. Another thing worth pointing out is just how these numbers fall. This is a $79 million ask of the voters, and we do talk about this as a tax liability often on a $100,000 value of a residential property, and it's written differently. This is prescribed by state law, the way in which it has to be described, and the crux of the difference is going to be in whether we're using taxable valuation or true and full. And so I actually don't live in the city of Grand Forks. I use my own bill just to calculate this. And a true and full value is not even the market rate. My home would be even higher. But my true and full value is about $150,000. And when you work through the calculator that would be available through our website, and this is on your tax statement, which we can point to where you find that number, it would essentially come down to what's equivalent to that 96.93 per 100,000 square feet, $144 a year on that. At the same token, the taxable value, which is a different number but is being contemplated here in this question, of the $150,000, it's only about $6,700. So you can see this here, that $21.54 on $1,000 of value is not the same as your market rate of your home, nor is it the same as even the true and full value. So there'll be a lot more information available. I personally make myself available to you or any voters who had a question about that, but it'll be on the website. So just to note here, this is prescribed by state law and it must be described this way, even though it might be more common explanation against $100,000 in value of a residential property. Sorry for the wonky explanation there, but I thought it was worth at least pointing out. And so here you find the resolution, and the administrative recommendation would be to adopt the resolution calling a special election to vote on the question of approving an initial resolution for general obligations school building bonds. And one final point that should have been said, the single polling place for this is set at the Alaris Center. It's open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. On May 16th. So just to make that clear as well.
I know there were issues with previous referendums because of this, but I think Scott Berge and team did a great job educating the public about that difference in how it gets calculated. So, clarifying questions or comments? Go ahead, Amber.
I did ask about this at the finance committee meeting because it is, to anyone who doesn't live in this world, it is very confusing. And I think your explanation helps a lot. I think a comment that I would have is if we have that tool accessible at our on our website, I think any presentation that we give, it would be helpful for anyone or Dr. Brenner and co to say, okay, everybody open your phones and type in this address so that any individual can essentially do the work to see what that figure would be. Because it is confusing if you try to add stuff up and do the, dollar value at the poll. So there's a lift there to educate, but I think your explanation was very clear. And especially pointing someone back to the tools that they have for their own property could be helpful. So thank you.
Other clarifying questions or comments? Just a quick question. It's more of an issue for those of us around the room. We have to canvass this on May 29th. Is that Memorial Day? I don't have my calculator out. I mean, it would just mean that we would have to have a meeting on May 29th because it's in state law.
Yes, it is.
It is Memorial Day. So we will have to have a short meeting that Monday on Memorial Day, just for the board members. So, and that's whether it's a positive vote or a negative vote, we have to canvass on the 29th. So, any further questions or comments? Didn't mean to deflate anybody with that, but yeah. Go ahead.
Make a motion
Go for
to adopt the resolution calling a special election to vote on the question of approving an initial resolution for general obligation school building bonds.
Do we have a second? Second, was that you, Bill? Second by Bill. Any further clarifying questions? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7C, C, which is resolution for submission of school construction loan application, electronic pages 52 through 124. Brandon.
Thank you, Dr. Lund, members of the board. This is a great tool. As Bank of North Dakota has been described to me before as North Dakota's unfair competitive advantage, it proves true again. And North Dakota, or Bank of North Dakota, has a program available that can lend up to $10 million. And there's a couple bills in the works that could increase that cap. Lend up to $10 million for projects such as these at a very favorable rate of 2%. And so because that is likely a lower rate than what will be available in the market for bonds, you'd want to leverage as much of that program as possible. It does require that a board approve a loan application prior to submission. And there may be competition for these funds this coming biennium, and so we've been advised to complete the application and submit just as early as possible to make sure that we're in their pipeline for our project. That's what this resolution does for you here today. It puts the administration in a position to submit the application. You'll find attached the application itself with a number of attachments, and those pictures were referenced there. What you don't find in the board packet is the resolution to do that. It was a quick turnaround here from some of the latest conversation at the Finance Committee, and so at your table side is the resolution authorizing the school construction loan application, and that is the action that would be requesting a motion and second on, or approval on, is the adoption of the resolution.
Thank you. Clarifying questions or comments from board members for Brandon? Go ahead, Dave.
Just one because of the language of the memorandum. Are we to assume $10 million per project means the request is for $10 million total, rather than because we have multiple chunks built into the referendum ask that, is there any flexibility, or is that the question this evening?
No, I appreciate the question, and for clarity's sake, it would be $10 million for the entirety of the scope that we've just discussed.
Thank you. Other go ahead, Cynthia.
Brandon, we're talking about that school facility plan, right, on page, starting on page 68? I mean, it's part of that packet, correct?
It is a part of that packet. If, to my recollection here, is that you have the loan application itself. In the North Dakota law, when you have a project in excess of a certain amount, I think it's $350,000, you need to provide a plan for the Department of Public Construction to consider, which does include the demographics of your district, et cetera. So they're helping keep an eye long range and making sure that the need is there. And so that requires that facility plan. There's also some information about our current bond rating. And then lastly, I included as supported documentation is the Valley Middle School walkthrough document that ICON had put together describing some of the deferred maintenance and needs.
I appreciate that. There are typos and some grammatical errors on the form that this school facility plan for the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction that I sent to Dr. Brenner. It was a little bit nitpicky, but I can forward that to you. If I don't know how important that is. If it's not important, maybe it doesn't matter if some of the sentences aren't complete or have some.
No, obviously, we want a complete application to put the best foot forward, and so I would receive those and could incorporate those.
Any further clarifying questions? If not, the administrative recommendation is to pass the resolution authorizing school construction loan application, which was at your table side.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Okay. And that includes the certification of the minutes, correct? It is the second page of that, so I just want to make sure that that the motion includes the resolution, but also the certification of the minutes, so that we've got that. Any final clarifying questions? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. let's move on to 7D, which is consideration of an election contract with Grand Forks County, electronic pages 125 through 127. Brandon. And then I think, is this the new one that's at the table side?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes,
sorry.
we got the
So
one.
look at the one that was at your table side, not in your packet.
Yes, I apologize for the additional documents here. We wanted to make sure that this contract reflected the scope of this project, so there was a change there in the second paragraph that does match the language of the ballot that you had just approved. While we have standing relationship with the county for any general elections, we don't have them for any time we have a special election. And the county is a great help in this process. So we're very happy that they're willing to help us with our special election. And this contract just binds us in that. I did provide a quick summary of roles and responsibilities involved there in the cover memo. And so you can see that it's still up to Grand Forks Public Schools to set the date, hours, and polling location, to take care of any legal publications that would go out, to print the actual ballots as well as absentee envelopes, and then we would be in charge of all expenses associated with the election, whereas Grand Forks County is responsible for helping by naming the election board, including the inspector, training the election workers. They're allowing us use of their voting booths, and then lastly, a big help administering absentee balloting in accordance with the law. So we leave it to the experts on some of those items, and it's a partnership. We'll work together. So the administrative recommendation is to approve the election contract, and again, that's what you have in hand rather than the version that's electronically attached.
Clarifying questions or comments from any board members? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. We have a motion by Bill. Do we have a second? Second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7E, which is a 23-25 Student Transportation Services Contract, electronic pages 128, 129. Brandon.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Members of the board, state law requires that our public school districts award contracts for services for qualified service providers with the lowest competitive costs within terms that don't exceed 7 years. As you'll recall, in the December 12th meeting is when we set forth a path to publish requests for proposals from providers. You may also recall we've been working with Tom Watson as a consultant to just try to make sure a couple of things. One, that we made that RFP as appealing as possible for vendors to want to apply to that contract. And then two, making sure that we've spread the message far and wide so we do get vendor response to that. We published in the Grand Forks Herald per Century Code requirements twice, January 4th and 11th, and it set out a date of February 14th to open sealed bids. Although there was great exposure, ultimately when we got to our bid opening, we'd received just the one bid, and that was from Dietrich. And we had also gotten response from two other companies articulating some of the reasons why they didn't bid. They had cited constraints that we've been aware of, not just in our market, but more broadly of finding bus drivers. They had also explained one of the reasons that sticks in my head was supply chain issues. So our RFP requires that we have new buses or within a certain period. And they've, in some cases, had to order in on brand new buses that's sitting out 2 years, so they just can't get the equipment to satisfy what we're asking for. And so when we had the reality of those two, and when we opened our bid from Dietrich, it was at a higher rate than we thought. Now, it's a complex contract. There's a number of different groups involved. Some of those would be, your general education routes. Some of those are special education routes. Some of those routes are priced based on the uniqueness of us going to Grand Forks Air Force Base and back. Then there's pricing for field trips, et cetera. But the table I provided in summary articulates just some of the crux of what that result was, and it was large increases anticipated here. And just below the table, there's even some articulation where the agreement in nature had changed, where Dietrich is responsible for fuel, and it's common practice that they were responsible for fuel. Should it exceed, fuel prices by a certain amount, then we could share in that cost 50-50. Some of those arrangements are quite normal, but for the entirety of that fuel cost to be just on the district is abnormal. And it can amount to a large dollar amount. So what we have in front of us is a choice for the board to make. They could accept the bid, they could reject all bids. Those are the two choices we have to make tonight, is to accept or reject. What I wrote in the cover memo here is, with administrative recommendation to reject the bid, what we would do immediately is continue the conversation with Dietrich and say, okay, what went into this logic here? Is there something in the way in which we asked for these proposals that made you write something here? The premise of the rejection would be cost and inaffordability. What it would give us the option to do is reopen the bids and invite those other parties who felt the constraint to provide us with a proposal and hopefully giving us options. And thirdly, we could also be working on a scenario that is, what would it look like if Grand Forks Public Schools provided student transportation by ourselves, not a vendor? And so I think with the timeline between now and when our contract is up on June 30th, we need to explore all three options. But I want to give you a sense of optimism too, through the work of Tom Watson. He had the initial contact with a number of vendors. He's confident that we could get a response from others. And there's a list of names which we had spoken with, but there's Harlow's and there's Valley, both North Dakota companies as well, that would look at this again. So by rejecting the bid, it would give us some options. And then the second part of what administration's asking for is then to approve administration to reopen the request for proposal process and come back to you with more information in the future.
Clarifying questions or comments to Brandon? Go ahead, Joel.
If we reject this bid, do we have any sense from the consultant that this is going to go up due to inflation, escalation, all the other ION words?
The sense of the consultant, and I would share in this, is that we will not have a bid that exceeds this dollar amount. It's my belief when reading this bid that there's a vendor will take what measures they need to make sure the margins they need to continue to operate a business are there, and this exceeds that amount. We think that there's competition out there yet, and by taking another approach with this RFP, we can get a result of a different vendor as well.
Other clarifying questions or comments? Go ahead, Joel.
Are there vendor relationships where we could lease buses and do this ourselves? Is that one of the options on the table?
No, I appreciate that question. I think that this is my mind here. If Dietrich would not get this bid, I think they would have to think about their company's future in Grand Forks. And I think they've been a great partner in this, and I think that they're open to conversations such as that. We haven't done that yet without having responded to our bid just yet. But through the consultant, we've heard that there's an openness about assets, ownership, lease. I think that would be an important next conversation.
Melissa, did you have your hand up back there? Okay, sorry. Dave did, but you didn't. Go ahead, Dave.
I notice in the table, this current bid has a 7% increase built in then for each of the following 2 years. Could you clarify prior to this bid process what we were seeing? Were there annual increases built in, let's say, for 2021 and 21-22? In other words, were we seeing 6%, 7%, 8%, sort of a reasonable inflationary increase. And I guess what I'm getting to is such that this seems like out of the blue, 60%, 70%, 80% is quite a bit, right? If we're handling the inflationary pieces all along, trying to figure out where the numbers somehow jump. So could you just, if there were two other columns in the table prior to this, what would those look like?
Sure, and I'm working with a memory that is not native of my own. So I think that it's common, in the last agreement, we had a 2-year agreement that there would be a riser involved there. I think 7% is likely not out of the question, but I don't recall what it was, and if I have to guess, and maybe I don't have to, but I'm willing to, is that it wasn't that high. But I'd be very happy to look that information up and get it to you.
I just think single-digit increases are within the realm of understanding, and some other increases are not. We'll just leave it at that.
Go ahead, Amber.
The Finance Committee talked about this briefly, just as a discussion item or an update that was going to be brought to the board. And I certainly haven't been on the board as long as my counterpart over here, Dr. Lund, or Bill. But I don't recall a time that the school district has rejected a transportation bid. It could have happened in your time. But I think that speaks to the commitment of the school district to do what's in the best interest for the kids, ultimately. And at the end of the day, if we decided to move forward, or the district decided, well, this is the only one, we'd have to accept it, that cost would likely fall back on the families and the students, and that's not a cost that I'm willing to put on the backs of our families. And so I fully support us saying, let's take a second look at this and be clear about what our outcome is, and that we are looking at what is in the best interest of our students and their families. And I think it's nice to have the consultant in our back pocket as a partner to help us kind of navigate through this, especially if it's uncharted territories. And so, yeah, I think it's just a commitment that we can say to the public that this is, we're willing to look at options again and understand some creative options so that we can get it right, so it's the best interest of the students.
Any further clarifying questions or comments? Go ahead, Cynthia.
At the finance, or at this committee, that's finance, Amber had asked for the numbers, so I appreciated you giving us those numbers. The 22-23 numbers, I'm assuming, are just current to, what, the end of February or something? Because the other numbers would be for the whole school year, correct, Brandon?
Yes, and I asked for those numbers from somebody else, and I didn't clarify that point. But I think that's right. I think that's the way to interpret those.
So as you pointed out in your memo, there's a good increase, especially in that general education ridership. So I saw that as positive, and I would second Amber's feelings, having been on the board not as long as Dr. Lund or Bill, but longer than many. I've never wanted to put transportation costs on students and families. School is required, it's public education, and children have to go. And sometimes, I know my personal work, or my work for my professional, is very eye-opening, but there are many families that don't have cars of their own. And so this general education rider count, I think, is kind of telling. I would make a motion, actually, to reject all bids and post a new legal notice.
Good, do we have a second? Who said second? Joel, okay. Brandon?
And if it's okay, I could suggest some language, just because I didn't include this detail in the memo, but it's to reject all the current bids and authorize district administration to initiate a procurement process or procurement and post a legal notice for student transportation services commencing this school year 23 to 26 with the option for a period not to exceed 7 years for the contract century code.
I thought that's what
Apologize.
Cynthia said.
Yeah, that's,
That's what I heard.
That's definitely what I said.
Are you okay with that as a second? Okay. Well, I'm glad we're moving along because obviously Bill and I need, our bedtime is approaching, obviously. So, any final questions or comments? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Before we move on to F, Brandon, I just want to thank you. This was a lot of difficult issues that you did a wonderful job explaining to us, so thank you, and take a back seat for a couple of minutes while we do some other business. So but thank you, you made it a lot easier for us, so. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
This is not anybody, not for board concern, but I have 4 tests tomorrow and 3 of them are in AP classes, so would it just be okay if I just stepped out? Okay,
But
thank you.
not, you have to stay for 30 seconds.
Okay.
Let's go down to announcements for a second.
Okay.
Dr. Brenner?
Under announcements, I just want to congratulate Ryan on his state meet performance in swimming. He is a first-team All-Stater, and he's a high-flying academic, high achiever, and just want to congratulate you on your performance in Bismarck last weekend. Congratulations, Ryan.
Now you're excused. Good luck on your tests. Let's move on to item 7F, which is consent agenda, electronic pages 130 through 136. Do I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Cynthia. Do we have a second? Second by Monty. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7G, which is a waiver of years of experience and appointment of Ashley Lamoureux, electronic page 137. Dr. Brenner.
Yep, you've already said it. The good news is we're going to have people under contract this early for next year. Again, a hard-to-fill position, middle school English. Again, special thanks to Dr. Lewis for all of her pre-qualified pooling process. We're getting people under contract. So down to the recommendation, it's to allow 13 years for Ms. Lamoureux to come into the school district, and her salary would be, at present salary, would be $60,476, and that will likely change after bargaining. Thank you.
Clarifying questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second? Motion by Bill, do we have a second? Second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7H, policy review, electronic pages 138 through 153. Dr. Shab.
Tonight, we are doing some completion of a first reading. We met this past week. Thanks to Cindy's notes there, you can read what we've done, but I make a motion for the first reading to approve HEAC, Management of Student Activities Fund, HEAD, Fixed Assets Management, HEAF, Fund Balance Policy, HEBA, System of Accounts, ICCB, Disposal of School Equipment and Supplies, and HDB, Revenues from School-Owned Properties.
Just one addition, that HEAD, that would be effective July 1 per the memo. Okay. Do we have a second for that? We have a second by Monty. Further clarifying questions from other board members about any of those 6 policies for their first reading, realizing they will be coming back in 3 weeks for a second reading. Seeing no questions, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Back to you, Dr. Shab.
This was a heavy Brandon Bombach review of policies. We would rescind then the following policies that are current policies: 3350, monies in school buildings, 3240, relations with vendors, 3110, funds management, we did not replace that one. 3130, borrowing, we did not replace it with another one. 3320, requesting goods and services requisitions, and 3321, requisitions, and purchase orders procedures. I would move that we rescind those policies.
Do we have a second? Second by Monty. Further clarifying questions or comments? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 7E, which is Superintendent Evaluation Committee, including the March evaluation and also the contract extension. It's on electronic pages 154 through 186. Josh.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. As described in the minutes from the Superintendent Evaluation Committee, the committee met last Tuesday evening. We reviewed the evaluation with Dr. Brenner present. We had discussion throughout the committee on each heading of the overall evaluation, and each committee member provided quite a bit of input around all of the different questions and such. We also received feedback from Dr. Brenner himself and allowed him to some time to go over the evaluation and give us feedback on what he felt and how he felt and action items he took away from the evaluation itself. Following that, we continued on some discussion around that. With that, I would offer up to Dr. Brenner if he wants to elaborate on any of that discussion.
Sure, thank you, Josh. First of all, I want to thank all of you, 8 out of 9 city board members, 4 out of 5 base board members completed the evaluation, and I certainly appreciate your time and effort that goes into it. It's not a short document by any stretch. And as always, and I say this every time, your narrative comments are more important than probably the scoring grid. So that gives me some very specific feedback. The strategic plan was mentioned a few times in there. I think it's time for a revisit and a reboot, so I'd like to get all of us through the Be Legendary School Board training on June 8th and 9th. I think that will set the stage for us to finesse that strategic plan so it's updated. It was written from 2020 to 2025, but I think it's time for, particularly since we have 4 new board members from last summer, to take a look at that and see how we want to wordsmith that. Aside from that, there was conversation about some of the information that you may not intimately know about my work and whether or not those could be NAs. And what we talked about was I'll look at some other evaluation tools that are used not only in North Dakota but across the country to see if it's a time to even change the tool itself and bring that back to the committee when that committee is reorganized for next school year. So that would be sometime in early September. Other than that, I just want to thank you. I'm grateful for the contract extension. That for me is a vote of confidence, and I want to thank you for that.
I would echo the comments made by Dr. Brenner regarding discussion around if this was the correct tool. There was a lot of discussion around that NA option and the fact that having an NA would, a non-applicable option for a question would affect the weighting of a question and how that all worked in. So there was quite a bit of discussion around if this is the right tool in fact, or if we should be looking at something different, or how those questions fall into place correctly and how we can best answer those questions as a board for the evaluation tool. With that, as Dr. Brenner alluded to, the second piece of the meeting revolved around Dr. Brenner's contract extension. With all Superintendent Evaluation Committee members, a unanimous motion was made, recommendation for approval of the superintendent evaluation along with forwarding of a new 3-year contract for Dr. Brenner effective July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2026. That was a unanimous recommendation for approval to the school board.
So you're making that as a motion? Thank you.
I would make that as a motion.
Do we have a second? Second by Dave. And just to comment, the contract extension is just dates. Nothing else changed in the contract. It was just the dates. That was the only change. So,
And the salary.
Well, that was already in that was already written in it, so. Any further clarifying questions or comments from board members? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Just one thing, not about the second part, the contract, but we've had those discussions in the past about the kind of, what you've talked about, the tool, thank you. And so I do think that we've had this enough times that maybe it's definitely time to get a new tool. My other comment that I'd like to make is that Dr. Brenner, and I think I've said this in my evaluation, has a really good, strong team. So for me, very often, I'm thinking about what Catherine Galach is doing and what Dr. Brenda Lewis is doing and what Eric Ripley and what Brandon Bombach's doing. And so it almost becomes an evaluation of the whole rather than Dr. Brenner's evaluation for me, because so much of this is the work of a team. And so I don't know how you single it out, but that's how I feel about the evaluation.
Any other comments or questions from board members? If not, the motion is to accept the evaluation and the contract extension. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 8, which is other announcements. Dr. Brenner.
Along with the commendations to Ryan, also to Maggie and the Red River Rough Rider girls basketball team who made it through the East Regional Tournament last week, and they will be in the state tournament this week. Congratulations, Maggie. Maggie's been a trooper. She's gone through an injury, but she's still part of the team. She's still attending practice. She's still doing her homework. And she's still being an outstanding student and coming to the board table as well. So congratulations to the Lady Rough Riders. And the boys team from Red River made it as well. So congratulations to them. And our Central boys just came up just a little bit short. They had a miraculous win in the, what I would call the semifinal round, coming through the back door, and they just came up a little bit short to get to the state tournament. So all in all, it's been an exciting tournament season. And finally, just a reminder, next week is spring break. Some of our leadership team will be in and out or taking some vacation days as well. And our next board meeting is not until March 27th.
Catherine or Dr. Lewis, any announcements? Melissa? So I got good news and bad news, just like last week. The good news is we have 3 weeks off because we had an early board meeting. The bad news is we have to have a very short canvassing meeting on Memorial Day, that Monday in May. So that's my good and bad news. Board requests for future consideration. Seeing none. School board norms. Jeff, how did we do?
Well, we have 7 school board norms. I'd like to take 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 15, to speak to each one of these. I'm just kidding.
Certainly. When we're done, you can do that.
We did fine. We did great.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 9, which is the executive session. This is to discuss negotiating strategy or provide negotiating instructions regarding contracts which are currently being negotiated or for which negotiation is reasonably likely to occur. After the executive session is done, we will open it back up, but all we're going to do when we open it back up is to adjourn. We don't have any further stuff, so I hate for people to wait a half an hour, 45 minutes just to hear us say we're adjourned, and then Jeff goes on his 15-minute diatribe about the stuff. So at this time, I would ask for a motion to hold an executive session to discuss negotiating strategy or provide negotiating instructions for contracts which are currently being negotiated or for which negotiation is likely to occur in the immediate future. Can I get a motion and a second? We have a motion by Joel and a second by Dave. Do we have to vote on this, Cindy? I always forget. Oh, so we do. Okay. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's take about 5 minutes to regroup, and then we will start our executive session.